And for more on the prospect for a U.S. economic rebound, we want to bring into the conversation Gene Sperling, National Economic Council Director during the Clinton and Obama administrations. He is now the author of the new book, Economic Dignity. And Gene, we appreciate you joining us this morning. We haven't talked to you in quite some time. You lived through the crisis of '08 and the aftermath. How does this compare in your mind? And how do you think about the policy measures that we're taking thus far?
Well, look, it's not as scary in the sense that you're not looking at a global bank meltdown that could go into a longstanding Great Depression. On the other hand, in other ways, it is more dramatic. I mean, the numbers that we're going to see on May 8th, this Friday, on the unemployment rate and the numbers of jobs that are lost are numbers we'll have never seen in our country. So this is dramatic. I mean, Andrew, I can't imagine you and I ever talking about 20 million jobs being lost in a month, or 20% unemployment rates, or a second quarter that would be down 20 or 30 or even 40%. So in that sense, it is more dramatic, and it takes a more sustained economic response. And what I don't know is whether our policymakers have grasped that this is going to be more longstanding. You're talking about, is the economy coming back in the third quarter? Well, those type of economic terms aren't going to mean that much. If you go down 40% in the second quarter, you could have growth, so-called, in the third quarter, and it could still be coming up just a blip. I mean, think about this. The Congressional Budget Office projected that after losing growth at 40% rate in the second quarter, growth would come up 30% in the third quarter, and unemployment would still average 16% for all three of those months. And I think for us to be serious about this, we've got to try to make more people whole for a longer time. I think that means not coming back with a brand new package all the time, but having an automatic extensions of things like the robust unemployment insurance, or a more bold payroll protection that goes on until we start seeing these numbers come down from such, truly dramatically high levels as, 10, 15, percent employment for as far as the eye can see.
Right. Gene, though, do you think there will be the political will for that on both sides of the aisle for lots of different reasons? We obviously have an election coming up, presidential election coming up, which will play in all of this. At the same time, there are questions about our debt and our debt load. How do you think it plays out?
Well, in terms of our debt and debt load, we obviously cannot afford to be wasting money. I think people are going to question a lot how much of the $2 trillion in the previous tax cut were really necessary when we see ourselves in a time of crisis. On the other hand, this is a moment where certain fiscal concerns can be highly counterproductive. If you have states that are going to be drained of $500 billion in revenue due to the crisis, not issues they did. If you have people that are not made whole and are going to not be able to pay their rent, could lose their home, could go into decline, that's not only a humanitarian travesty to me, but that's also going to mean less people buying, less people being in strong situations. So, I think the best way to ensure we have the political will is let's put in place something now that says unemployment that's going to come close to making whole your check is going to stay until till we get down to the levels that we're more used to hearing, at least 7% or something of unemployment, certainly not trigger off at 15 or 16% levels we really haven't seen since the Great Depression, and have those things go automatically. So instead of saying, we're going to do something for the next 2 months, and then we discover, oh my God, there's a second wave, or oh my God, a 70% partially open economy doesn't really feel so good. We have to rush everybody back to Congress. Let's put in place something right now that says we're going to help keep people whole. We're going to help keep small businesses keep the lights on. We're going to help states from not having to lay off teachers and state troopers. And let's say we're going to do this to a particular economic level. I think that would be a smarter way for us to deal with this really unprecedented downfall in our economy.
Gene, I want to talk to you about two things. One, about the book, but I also want to just ask you real quick about bailouts. We've had the airline bailout. We're just learning this morning that United Airlines planning after the September 30th date in which they have to keep the staff on, that they're intending to lay people off. This is something that we anticipated was going to happen, but I think may raise the question in this instance. Of course, we're saving the shareholders, we're saving the airline, we're saving hopefully some of the employees. How do you think that's going to play in the public when people look back at some of these things? And what's that going to do to the politics of our moment?
Well, I don't think there's any question that people are willing to do what's necessary. But when they see unjust enrichment, when they see companies taking that benefit that looks like it's for executives or even shareholders and not for employees, they're outraged. And to be quite honest, they should be. I'm not saying that, that these companies have done anything wrong in ways we might have thought of the larger banks a decade ago. But still the fact is that when we're providing that public resources, we're doing it to keep people whole during this pandemic. And when one can show that money is being used, every penny, to pay for workers who otherwise would have been laid off, to help them keep their health care if they would have been disconnected, I think you'll see support, even for aid that could potentially flow to larger companies. But when it's just money going in, there's no connection to helping workers. There's no sense of shared sacrifice and executives taking a cut in their pay. Then I think there is going to be a lot of outrage, and I don't blame them for happening. We've got to make sure. But I will say, when money is going to where it should, to people, to keep them whole, that is going to be money well spent. Because if we try to pull back too quickly and we see this type of falls in GDP stay, if we have an entire year where we're down 10% GDP, that hit to our debt and deficits will be much larger than anything we're going to spend.
Gene, we got to run. The book is fabulous. You should go out and read it. I'm going to ask you in 30 seconds just to answer one final question, which was, the book is about economic dignity and the policies that are required to make it happen. The question is how we're going to be able to do that in a post-pandemic world.
Well, quickly, we have workers right now that we are recognizing the dignity and value of like we never have in our lives. And the question for us as a country are we, as Martin Luther King suggested, going to recognize the dignity and value of all work and are just give applause, or are we going to have policies to treat people with economic dignity? And I think when we see farm workers and nursing aides without paid sick leave risking their lives, we have to ask, are we treating them as just a means to our end? We're intrinsically just people ourselves. We could do that with decent pay, with universal health care, with universal paid sick leave. And this is the moment in our country where we're being forced to ask ourselves, how can we rely on these workers to save our lives, not just now, but even before the crisis and after, and not treat them economically with the dignity that all people who come to work and work hard for their families should have.